Alright, so there's my tank that I've been using. Last time we ran the Tower of Power, I've been using this tank. This is the tank that came with the boat. I'd estimate it's about twice the gallons of that tank. It looks even bigger, but that tank right there actually at its thickest point is a little bit thicker than this tank. Nice thing about this tank is it fits underneath there perfectly, and then you can put the bench seat back in and you don't even know the tank's back there. And it's got a filler that's integral to the boat, so I had to unscrew that. So I had to take the screws out to unscrew this to get this, to lift this up enough so I could get the tank, get this hose disconnected from the tank. And I noticed, see this little piece right here? Something tells me that there may have been maybe a cover or something that snaps over this. I don't know. So I'll have to look and see if there's something that, like some kind of cover that snaps onto here and is retained by this piece of plastic that looks like it broke off something. But I'm not too worried about that. The problem I have at the moment is that this tank is not empty. It's got quite a bit of something in it. I took a whiff and it does not smell like water and it doesn't smell like gas. I think what it is I think it's gas that has converted into some other chemical altogether from age. You'll notice that somebody just came and just unceremoniously cut that hose. That hose right there is the hose that's attached to the dip tube. So that has a tube on the inside that goes down into the bottom of the tank, so it draws, so it draws down the tank. That right there, that barbed fitting, had a clear piece of PVC hose on it that runs to this little fitting right here, so that's a vent. And of course that large barbed fitting right there is where the filler neck hooks up. There is a sending unit in here, okay? Right there is the wiring for it. So that sending unit would have been working in conjunction with a fuel gauge up in the front. So there's not a lot of gauges up in the front, but one of those two smaller gauges is probably the fuel gauge. That one there is kind of weird because it doesn't have an E or F, like to show empty or full. That's why I was questioning whether or not that is the fuel gauge. And the other one is so, the plastic I think is broken and it's so cloudy and looks like rust and it looks like water got inside that one. That you can't even read it at all. So Mark's going to help me take this heavy tank out of here, but I just wanted to disconnect the wires first. So there's a red wire here that is going over to the sending unit, and it goes to this big coil of red wire, which is, much longer than it needs to be. And then there's two black wires attached to it that are just cut. One of them goes to a tab on the sending unit, which makes me think, ground. The other one is unceremoniously attached to that tab that sticks up from the tank. All right, so when I say unceremoniously, it's because it's very loose and somebody just used a self-tapping screw. And so that's not kosher right there. I think that should be a screw and a nut fastener type of setup there, because I think it's a bad idea for that to come loose. If this ground were to fail, well, you see, this ground might be separate from this altogether. This might be electrically isolated because there's a gasket in here. So this could be the circuit for running the actual sending unit, the circuit path. And this might just be to ground the tank for maybe to keep static electricity from being able to build up on it or something crazy like that. I don't know. As far as who makes the tank, there is a label here. It's so dirty. I don't know if I can clean it without it falling off. This looks like an AFP All right, let me see if I can get something to clean that better than my finger. All right, so I was explaining to Mark, he was curious how many gallons this held, and I was explaining to Mark, since it's a nice big rectangle, we could actually take the dimensions of this tank and we could plug it into a volume calculator that would be online, where you put the length, the width, and the depth of a cube, and we would be able to know the volume of it. The actual usable gallons that it could hold is going to be less, because you would never want to fill the tank so that there was no airspace in the top at all, I doubt. So maybe this will tell us. See, right now you guys could probably see what this says, but I'm not wearing my reading glasses. I need my son's young eyes to come over here and tell me what this says. See, this says this tank has been tested
under 33
under
CFR.
All right, so that must be some kind of a regulation. That might be a Coast Guard regulation. This says something pressure 3 psi. What's that say?
Maximum
recommended.
Yeah.
What kind of pressure is that? Something
Test.
pressure. Oh, maximum recommended test pressure 3 psi. That is a serial number?
Yep.
What does that say? Gallons. Does that say gallons?
Yep.
All right, so problem is we can't see it, can we? Oops.
If I get closer, if you move your camera.
Well, the camera's gonna have the shot. It's all about the video. All right, Mark has informed me that he can clearly see that under gallons it says 090. And I have explained to him that this is not a 90-gallon tank. So I think there's a decimal point that was rubbed off or something, and this is probably a 9.0 gallon tank. There's also a model number, but we can't quite see that. I can see, I think it said the date on it is March 1986, which I think is the year of the boat. So this is probably original to the boat. So AFP fuel tank, kind of neat. Well, that tank's pretty heavy, and we tilted it, and some of it came up really close to the filler neck here, and I could see that it's clearly got the coloring to it, so it's treated. It's about a third full. I don't know what I'm going to do with all that gas. I'm tempted to maybe draw a little off in a clear jar and do a little analysis and try and figure out whether or not maybe it's not horrible. I don't know. You know, before I go in for the night, I've still got my 12-volt regulated power supply out here that's self-protected. And rather than hook a battery up to the boat circuits, which if there's a short and, you know, nothing to limit the current, could cause fire, melting, all kinds of horrible things, I just hooked up my power supply. It's going to limit the current to around 3 amps. So, this ring terminal clearly was made to go on the battery by the looks of it. So I think this is the ground for the circuits in the boat. And then I really don't have a lot else going on here for wires that aren't already hooked up to or running somewhere. So I know that this red wire I just took off of the sending unit, so I know that's not it. So I stripped this red wire that was cut and hooked up to that. And I just got to, let's see. My wire came off of my power supply. So I'm not drawing any current right now. Prior to hooking that up, I came over here and I made sure that all these switches are in the what I believe to be off position. This is a 3-position switch. Middle must be off. Up is navigation lights. Down is anchor lights. Pump. Hopefully that's the bilge pump. Accessory, have no idea what that might be nothing. And we've got a horn. Okay, if I press the horn button, we get nothing and no current draw. Accessory, nothing. Navigation lights is probably that pole right there, which I know is disconnected, and that's got a weird plug in the bottom, and the wire for that is the plug with the wiring attached that's broken off or torn out is in the bottom there, so I'm not surprised that that doesn't work. I mean, really, what I really want is this. Oh yeah. You hear that, guys? Bilge pump works. Well, we might have to rig something up, a ring terminal or something, to get that working, because that would be nice to have. Here's a close-up look at those two gauges. We're thinking this, Mark says he thinks he saw some fractions on this. So we're thinking this is the fuel gauge, what's left of it. This is that weird gauge. Does anybody know what that is? It has no markings on it. No numbers, no letters, no even graduations. The needle's kind of off to the side, kind of weird. At least I think that's by design. Is that like something to indicate how much of a tilt there is in the boat? I don't feel like the boat's tilted too badly on the trailer right now. It doesn't seem to move when I do that. So, does anybody have an idea what that is? Here's the tachometer. It's an OMC tachometer, so not sure what was in here originally for a motor. Well, we know that's not going to work. And then there's an OMC speedometer, but the speedometer is just one of those little, it's a little air tube that runs all the way to the back of the boat to a spot down low. And the idea is that there's a Venturi effect, that when the water runs by, it creates a vacuum. And essentially what this is a vacuum gauge that's calibrated, that when it sees a certain amount of vacuum, that's supposed to correspond to a certain speed. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that actually still works perfectly fine. It's getting kind of dark now, so it's hard to see, but there's two wires hanging down from underneath the dashboard with 1/4-inch spade terminals on it. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's the horn. I think I remember when we were cleaning this boat out, we came across the horn. It looked pretty rough. So that pole that was my son had stuck in there, the anchor light, that light that sticks up on the pole, that's the anchor light. There's a second anchor light in there. Neither one of them have usable wiring left on them, so they would probably take quite a bit to, well, I guess I could take the top apart, maybe snake a new wire through. I could probably fix that. But the good news is that now that it's gotten a little darker, those are the navigation lights, or running lights for lack of a better term. And they're green and red, and green's always on the same side on every boat, I believe, because the idea being that if you see a boat at night out on the water in front of you, you can tell whether he's coming straight at you. If you see red and green, he's coming straight towards you. And if you see green, you know he's going to port or starboard or vice versa. I'm not a boat guy. Well, it's Sunday morning, July 19th, 2020. I'm down here in the pigsty, workshop, where I was last night, searching high and low for the box where I had put the remaining parts that I wanted to install before we head out on the water today. This is the reverse latch, locking latch assembly. What this does is when you're traveling along in the boat in forward gear, this doesn't do anything. It basically releases a pin and allows the motor to be able to tilt up. So if you hit an underwater obstruction, the boat motor is actually designed to be able to do this. And then the idea would be that, well, if the motor was able to freely hinge up like that whenever it wanted, when you put it in reverse, the prop turning in the other direction would have the propensity to want to pull the bottom of the motor up. So this latch, when you shift into reverse, this latch engages a pin that locks the motor from being able to lift. But you want it unlocked when you're going forward. So if that makes sense. You also obviously want it unlocked when you want to be able to tilt the motor up for travel. So that's what this mechanism does. These are all new parts that this part right here is all new. The other one was really bad. And the stainless steel pin that it pivots on is new. And the only thing I was missing, which I just found this morning, was I found like the only non-ferrous cotter pin that I have in the whole place. I would have put a stainless one in there if I had one, but I don't. This is a brass one. It's a little short, but it's going to be long enough to do the job. And then, remember these things? These are the lift assist shocks, or for whatever you want to call them. I never really figured out whether or not these do anything. They call them lift assist. And the interesting thing about it is the manufacturer decided to do a kind of funky two-piece bushing where you have, this is the remnants of one that's fallen apart, but you see it's got a bevel to it. So you have one of these on each side. And, well, Mercury discontinued this part. You can't get it as even Quicksilver. So it almost seems like Mercury said, the hell with these things. They're not that important. What I was going to do was, I looked online. Everybody online that has any of these new old stock, they have like maybe one. I need 4. And then, you know, if I buy one from one guy and then pay his shipping, and then buy another from the other guy, pay his shipping. I talked about this before. It ends up being like $40 to replace these 4 things. Forget it. Then I was going to make like, get a piece of Delrin or something like that, and maybe actually machine one that wouldn't be, you know, obviously not the same durometer as this rubber, but maybe just some kind of urethane or something that I could put in there. So I was going to do that. I never got around to doing that. I'm going to just stick these back on the way they are. I did find, I found the hardware that bolts all of these shocks on, but there are actually decorative caps that go over these bolts and are held in by a screw, and that I did not find. But that's just cosmetic, so I'm not going to worry about it. It's not even 11 o'clock yet, and the sun is beating down and cooking me. I'm going to move this thing out to the front yard. And now for a little while at least, I'm in the shade. Ooh, I am rapidly running out of excuses not to take this thing on the water. Okay, so I got this installed, the lift assist or whatever you want to call it there. I have temporarily misplaced the other one. Go figure. I'm not going to worry about it. Having one on there should be enough to help assist it some. This motor's so heavy when it comes to tilting. So I got the tilt rod assembly, locking latch, whatever you call it here back in. The reverse locking latch, that's what I think it's called. Okay, so you can actually see right now it's actually in the locked position. So I guess in neutral it's also locked. There's a spring that runs up to a pin that's actually right here. You can't see it behind there. So I suggest hooking the spring onto the pin first and then pulling against the spring and getting the pivot pin in, and then lining it up to get the cotter pin in is a bear. Oh, by the way, did I mention that I only found one non-ferrous cotter pin in my whole place? And well, guess what I did? I managed to lose that. But happily I found a very thin, long stainless steel machine screw and nut that I put it in there. So that ought to be good to go. It might vibrate out, so I might bend the end of the screw over a little bit to actually keep that from being able to happen. Alright, so I want to test the latch. So all I need to do is, let's see, if I put it in, I believe if I put it in forward gear, this should move up. So we shift it in. And I even heard the clunk of the spring because that now moved up, right? I think. So now I should be able to drop the motor down and it should actually be able to go and hook onto this pin right here that you can change the position of. So right now it's unlocked. Now I'm going to put it in reverse. locked. And that's neutral. And apparently it locks in neutral too. So that's interesting. So when I want to put the boat, when I want to put the motor in travel position for towing, I guess I have to put it in gear. Huh. Oh well. All right, all hitched up, ready to go. Got 5 gallons of fuel in there. Got a little bit still left in that tank. And got everything done. The one thing I have left that I'm gonna just leave off for now is I've misplaced the trim tab that goes here. So there's a disc that bolts up into here that has a little vertical tab. And the idea is you can rotate it and retighten it to adjust to compensate for rotation of the prop, causing the tendency of the motor to want to turn in one direction. However, I read online that if you have a zero feedback steering system or helm like I installed on this boat, that it's not really that important. So I might be able to run with it off of there. I might want to just get a blank disc to go up on here. But I mean, if I find the trim tab, I'm going to put it in there. The other thing too is I guess the trim tab also acts as one of the zinc anodes. I guess this part is made out of zinc, and it acts as one of the anodes, sacrificial anodes, that helps with corrosion on your propeller.